few years ago, I was living in a fairly nice apartment complex, having a cigarette on my balcony around 3 AM on a Tuesday night. I'm usually on my phone, but I got this weird chill and looked up to see a middle-aged man walking down the sidewalk across the complex. It struck me that he did not belong here, and I realised he wasn't one of the residents. As I was thinking this, he suddenly stopped and looked right at me, making eerie, way too long eye contact, and then rushed off between buildings in the opposite direction of my apartment. I told my husband about it and joked that if we get a knock on our door in our next 15 minutes, we can assume it's that creeper. Sure as shit, 10 minutes later, there's this quiet, faint tap, tap, tap on our door. My eyes probably popped out of my head, and my husband jumped up to grab his gun from the other room. I slowly walked up to the door to look through the peephole, holding my breath, and there was the man I had seen, looking right at me through the peephole. I knew he wasn't able to actually see me, but the image of him looking right into my eyes still freaks me out to this day. My husband walked up to the door, stared through the peephole and shouted, "What?" in his threatening voice. Apparently the man had his hand on the doorknob and jerked back in a surprise to hear a man's voice. Dude asked for Jeremy or some made up name, and my husband told him to leave. After bullshitting a little longer, the guy finally walked downstairs, only to peer up into my living room window from the lawn. I closed the blinds and he moved over to stare at me through the balcony door. He didn't move on until after I shut that one too. We called security and gave a clear description and everything. A few days later we got a report from our complex that an apartment had been robbed around that time that night. What keeps me up at night is this question. If you're going to rob an apartment, why would you go to one that you definitely knew a woman was awake and home, seemingly alone at? I was out in the middle of nowhere at a musical conference my wife was presenting, held at an old church retreat camp. One of her presentations ran way over, so the lodge's cafeteria was closed. With no car, no phone. This area was so remote that there was no coverage for mobile, and no vending machines. The only resort was to walk to the nearest town and get food. I grabbed a coat and flashlight, and had no issue on the trip down and snagged a pizza from the spot along the highway around midnight. On the way back, it was a different story. I got a severe feeling of discomfort. I could feel eyes on me. This was out in the middle of the woods, so my first instinct is that there's an animal following me. Knowing most predators like to hit from either above or behind, I turned on my phone light and kept it pointed behind me and swept my flashlight up and down as I walked. The whole walk back, I heard rustlings, first along one side, then following behind. I kept a steady pace and acted cool, even though deep down I was terrified. Shortly before I was back on site, the feeling left. No more sounds. My wife and I enjoyed pizza and slept in. But it was 2 days later that we got a shock from the news. A homeless woman was found less than 1,500 yards from her site and had been mauled and partially consumed in what appeared to be a cougar attack. Estimates of the time of death was the same night and the same time I went out for pizza. It was winter break, freshman year of college. I drove up to visit one of my friends in northwestern Pennsylvania for New Year's. I needed to be back home the next day for work, so I decided to drive back at like 2 AM. I was driving down Interstate 79, and I maybe saw 2 cars in a 60-mile span. I came up around a bend and saw what looked like a black bear in my lane, and I swerved and went off the road, crashing into a tree. I was in the middle of nowhere and the bear just booked it into the woods. My car was fucking total and I knew I wasn't going to see any cars for hours to help me out. I called 911 and they said they would come in like 20 minutes. I got out the car and stood up on the shoulder of the highway and waited. After about 5 minutes I heard some rustling in the bushes and there it was, the fucking bear. Turns out when I went off the road I hit a cub and Mama Bear was pissed as hell. I booked it over to the back of the car and hopped in the trunk. Thank God I had a big Ford Expedition so the bear couldn't fuck with it too much. For another half an hour, the bear tried ramming the car and was trying to get me in a frenzy. The police showed up and all the sirens scared Mama Bear off into the woods again. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. Had I not been able to get in the boot, I don't know what would have happened. Have you ever had one of those days where you feel like you're a completely different person? Well, I had the strangest day, not too long ago in fact. It was a day like any other. I woke up as you normally would, made myself a cup of tea, got myself some breakfast, watched some telly, the usual stuff. But then I went onto my phone, turned on my phone, switched on my iPhone, and it would not accept my fingerprint for Touch ID. And it wasn't just, the thumb that I use normally for my fingerprint. Any of my fingerprints wouldn't allow me to get access into my phone. My dog, I have a small dog, and he stayed on the other side of the apartment from me, and he wouldn't take any treats from me whatsoever. I trained him not to take treats from anyone except me to avoid, poisoning or illness. But he wouldn't even take his favourite treats from me or cuddle with me. When I went to hug him, he hid in his kennel. So I decided to go out. I had to pick up a few bits, a couple of errands, just the standard stuff. And I always take out my debit card. And I knew for a fact that I had money stored in that account. And the strangest thing was that my PIN didn't work for any debit card. So I had to wind up running it as credit. And I used the same PIN for absolutely everything. Things were starting to get a little bit freaky. I got back home and decided to go on the computer, do a little bit of shopping, and just to see whether I could gain access into my accounts. The only websites I could get into were Reddit, Gmail and Amazon, pages where my password is stored. Any website where I had to enter any username and password, it came back as incorrect. Thank God there's no password to wake my computer up, or I wouldn't been able to do any work that day as well. But you know what the strangest thing was? Is I just went to bed early that night. I didn't think too much of it. And then when I woke up the next day, everything was back to normal. And to this day, I have no idea why. My passwords work, my debit card works, my dog loves me again. And it was so strange about that day. And even to this day, I still don't know what happened to me that day, or if I ever find out what happened. But it still freaks me out, nonetheless.